generations, business and industry growth and expansion into a community was largely driven around communities offering low-cost land and cheap labor. And so you're, for all practical purposes, incentivizing a business to come into the community. And when a business comes into the community, typically for generations, we've thought, well, business comes into the community and then people will come to the community to work, and then commercial development will expand and residential development will expand. And that's how you build community, by giving away cheap land and cheap labor. In the mid-90s, Florida said, that's flipped. Partly because of the baby boomers beginning to retire, which was the largest generational numbers, and the subsequent generations not having quite those numbers. But the whole business growth and business expansion philosophy sort of flipped, and businesses now have, in the mid-90s, and certainly we're seeing it now, begin to go where people are choosing to call that place home. So it's not who's offering now the lowest price land, it's where the labor force is. Georgia Power will produce annually a top 10 list of what businesses are looking for, and not true. Maybe 15 years ago, it was inexpensive land was number 1 or number 2. Now number 1 for the last 6 years has been a labor force. So I appreciate Richard Florida because he opened my eyes to what I had not had it open to before. Let's talk just a second about some numbers. And I was in it, let me just say, I was in North Carolina for 58 years before coming here, and was head of a couple of chambers. And when we thought about economic development, I mean, it was, we needed jobs. We needed jobs in our community. And we figured, gosh, you know, we'll figure out what the workforce. Here, it's flipping around, you know, particularly now. People want to live in Georgia, and they want to live in the Athens area. We did a presentation for the Georgia Chamber about 2 or 3 months ago, noting some of these rates. So, projected job growth in the next 15 years in the state of Georgia, the projected job growth is 42%. In the Athens area, it's nearly 60%. Athens area would be the 13 counties of the Athens Metropolitan Service area. So it's Athens and the 12, for all practical purposes, of 12 continuous counties. Projected job growth in the next 40 years, the state of Georgia is 83%, Athens area is 125%. So let's talk about population growth. The state of Georgia in the next 15 years will grow 20%. Athens area will grow 30%. Job growth in population growth in 40 years, 31% for Georgia, 50% for Athens area. So let's talk specifically about jobs. The national average, this is probably 3 months ago, there were 6.7 jobs for every 1 person that's looking for a job nationally. So if everybody who was looking for a job got a job, everybody was, there were 67 people out of 100 could get a job. And then we'd have complete and total employment. There'd be 33 people that would not have a job. In Georgia, 1.6 jobs are open for every 1 person who's looking for work. So everybody who's looking for work, you still have a lot of jobs left over. In Athens area, it's 1.75. So we are in, y'all, I think we're in a short-term dilemma, but we're in a long-term crisis of how are we going to get, with the jobs that we know that we have coming into the area, how are we going to find a workforce, a valued and valuable workforce? The Georgia Chamber has sort of jumped on this a couple of years ago, and really jumped on it using verbiage that I think is appropriate. This is a war for talent. We've got to find a workforce to help all of you guys be successful. Last year, in 2022, we took 55 folks, community and education and some elected leaders, down to Tuscaloosa for an inner-city visit. And we chose Tuscaloosa for a variety of reasons. And we went down there and we looked at 3 or 4 different areas that they had some excellent work in. And one is a town and gown relationship. How does the city and the University of Alabama work together? Another is riverfront development. They have, in Athens anyway, we have the North Cunning River that's running through Athens, and it might as well be, hardly anybody sees it. But water can be magic for commercial development. In Tuscaloosa, it don't. We looked at innovation and technology, largely with the University of Alabama and the University of Georgia interacting in their communities and creating an innovative community. On the way home, we stopped in Birmingham and we had spent 3 or 4 hours talking about homelessness. But the reason we went to Tuscaloosa was they have the single best workforce development program in the country. And it's been recognized in the country. It's been recognized by our national organization, not the U.S. Chamber, but the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives, for 2 years as the best chamber in the country because of their workforce development program. And what happened in 2012, Mercedes has a plant about 30 miles, maybe 20 miles away from Tuscaloosa. And Mercedes, they got there probably in the late 90s. The Mercedes came to the chamber and said, man, what we're doing in workforce development, gosh, it's just not working. Everybody seems to be going in different ways, but nobody's really talking. Would the chamber consider, like, jumping in and trying to help coordinate that? And my colleague down there said, not no, but heck no. Because it's too big. So 2 years later, Mercedes came back, and they had 25 other businesses with them, and they said, now what'd you think about it? And so they did. So they put together a program that really, again, like I said, it's gotten enormous press and is really changing people's lives. So much so that we've just gotten through a workforce development strategic plan for this community that is deeply rooted and almost, I wouldn't want to say it's duplicative of what was done in Tuscaloosa, but very much so. And the key reason, and I want to hit on this several times, the difference between what Tuscaloosa had been doing in their workforce prior to 2014 is the same thing that we do, which is we think, gosh, it's the schools, or it's Boys and Girls Club, or it's the schools. It's somebody else's job. And what they've been able to do is they've been able to get the business community to recognize that schools cannot do it alone. It takes the business community to make workforce development work. A lot of times, I think what we think about in our communities is it's the government, or maybe the government even funding workforce development efforts. When government funds or workforce development efforts, then they're helping fund in their tunnel vision. In Tuscaloosa, when the business community didn't just provide funding, but the business community was at the table, then the business community made a determination of what needs to be done and how it needs to get there. And it was incredibly successful. So what they've done in Tuscaloosa, and again, we're going to be looking at doing the very same thing here, is look at short term. How do you get people that are unemployed, who might be looking for a job for work now, in the workforce? Midterm, I mean, both of those hit what is happening right here at the Boys and Girls Club. Midterm is, how do you start talking to middle school children about the opportunities to come here and get skills? Or how do you get middle school children to recognize that they don't have to go to the University of Georgia or a four-year institution, but they can go to Athens Technical College and get a trade? How do you start talking about hope to middle school children who haven't ever had hope in their life about their work? And probably I think that where the foundation of workforce development is in pre-K to 5th grade. We have 20% of our children at Clark County School District are reading on 3rd grade level. 20%. That is absolutely heartbreaking. Studies will show that, you know, if up until 3rd grade, we are teaching our children to learn to read. And in that sort of that time frame, the light switches, the flip switches from learning to read to reading to learn. If a child isn't reading, hasn't learned to read, then they're not going to read to learn. And the number, the percentage of likelihood that they're going to wind up being unemployable is incredible, right? We have an opportunity, I think, to start to work to, I think 3rd grade reading literacy is the cornerstone to getting people to come in here and expand their opportunities. So, the Workforce Development Strategic Plan, on which we've been working for the last 4, 5, or 6 months in conjunction with all of the workforce development partners, but certainly the Boys and Girls Club, will address all of those issues, or all of those concerns, but the baseline focus of the singular first strategy is to get everybody who's involved in workforce development around the table and let's talk. We haven't done that, to the best of my knowledge, ever. We also then need to get the business community directly aligned with the school district, with Athens Tech, with the Athens area community, the Athens Community Career Academy. Got to get people all aligned and on the same page, but it has to be. It's not me, it's not the Boys and Girls Club, it's not Mayor Gertz, it's the business community that has to be at the table to tell us what you need, how you need it, and to help fund that effort in any way, shape, or form that you can. I think that, and I'll just go off on a little tangent, I think all of us have a compassionate nature in our heart. You know, we want to help those who've been underserved in some way, shape, or form. But you know, like me, I've got a job. I work like 60 hours a week in that job, and I have to put my service to the underserved in a bucket over here. Workforce development is a single issue. It's about economics, and the economics suggests that we have an opportunity to get those people who have been underserved, we have an opportunity to give them hope, to give them jobs, to give them a life that they never dreamed about. So when our economic requirement connects with people's compassion, you know, we can change the needle on generational poverty, and we may not have ever had the chance to do that before. But it's got to take all of us, the business community, sitting at the table. But here, you know, we were talking about being enrolled, enlisted, or employed. So we had our first hiring fair here in May, and we had, you know, the timing was awkward. So we only had maybe 60 of the 187 that participated, that came in for hiring, to be interviewed, but there were 82 job offers that day. We need to make sure our children are enrolled, enlisted or employed, but they can't be employed if we're not helping them all the way through their school.